I'm gonna go right into question and answer, and I really want to start with you, Chef Thiessen, is because you gathered a lot of response based off of your presentation and really the changes you made. The first question I think was very pertinent, coming from, I'm sure, someone with a dietitian background. Said, would you kindly describe the kitchen's relationship with dietary prescription orders and how RD's recommendation ultimately go out on the plate?
Well, again, let's go back to the times where I started with Northwell. The first thing that I noticed is that since we didn't have very good chef or qualified chef, the kitchens were run by the dietitians who had to do their job. But as well as me, a dietitian is not a chef, and a chef is not a dietitian. So one of the first things that I did is to make them work together, to make them understand that the chef runs the kitchen and is responsible for the quality of the food, and the dietitian is there to work in harmony with the chef to make sure that we're respecting the dietary restriction of our patients. It works very well. We still have, here and there a few issues, but it does work well. Another thing that I've done is a lot of our menus had a quick, short explanation on the back of our menus as far as the type of diets that are being served in the hospital, and we remove that from our menus. Again, because I do believe that it's a dietitian who need to explain to a patient what they can eat or not eat. Again, when the patient is suffering, and at the time they are looking at the menu, all they want to do is to order food and hopefully get great food. And I think, it's a human being that needs to talk to them. The dietary restriction or different diets that are for our patients are, we move them into our, what we call the arrival package. So if a patient wants to know a little bit more about their diet, the informations are also available in the arrival package, but no longer on the menu.
Right on. I thank you. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think there's two good days in the hospital, a healthy discharge and a healthy baby. Other than that, the person's having a hard day, and food can provide that comfort as well as healing. One of the other, and I'm glad to hear about the collaboration between culinary nutrition, and I think it provides a blueprint of how that can happen in hospitality as well. A number of other questions.
I would like to add something also in terms of the collaboration with our RDs and our chefs is during the culinary competition that we have on an annual basis. The first year I was here, the team were composed of 4 chefs, and now the teams are composed of 3 chefs and 1 dietitian. The dietitian has to cook with the chef, and the chef have to work with the dietitians to make sure that their recipes are, following our nutritional requirement.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's really the mantra of culinary nutrition in the curriculum that we're doing with Health Meets Food. And you had a number of questions that was all similar, and that was regarding the budget restraints of making great food and working within the food cost budget. And I'm a large proponent that it is possible, absolutely feasible. Can you explain how you're able to meet your budgetary restraints and also meet food costs and serve great food?
Well, the first thing I have to say is that prepared food, frozen food, prepackaged food, canned food, all of that is very expensive. When our chefs were buying pre-grilled frozen chicken breast, that is very expensive. You pay the labor, you pay the packaging, you pay all of that. That was one of the first things. The second thing that I did is, and again, when you prepare fresh food, it's a lot cheaper, than buying frozen food, finished frozen food. Another thing that I have to say is we do have a procurement department at Northwell that has done a remarkable job, and we have some wonderful purchasing program, under the Premier umbrella, which goes through US Food. They have been able to negotiate some amazing prices. And earlier during the discussion, I say that we serve about 10 million meals a year, and we exclusively buy antibiotic organic chicken from Harvestland through Purdue. And we are the largest consumer of fresh chicken on the East Coast with Purdue, with close to 2 million pounds a year. I can get fresh chicken breast at cost almost. So that's where we save our money. And another thing I mentioned is the American pasture grass-fed, grass-finished beef. That's going to be also a tremendous saving, because it's the first time that Strauss Association is working with a healthcare company. Actually, I've been working with them for the past 6 months to put the program together, because they were not yet big enough to handle Northwell, but they definitively wanted to get involved in healthcare. Currently we are buying, I give you an example, we are buying a grass-fed beef from Australia. It's not very sustainable when you think about it, yeah. But still, it was the cheapest grass-fed, antibiotic, hormone-free beef that I could find. And I always wanted to work with an American product, and I finally found it. Mm-hmm. And so, again, that beef program is going to save us about 20%.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm glad you, this really brings us right to a question I have. Not only for you, but it parlays directly into Gary Cohen with Healthcare Without Harm, is the food purchasing, is working locally. As you just said, you found a great product, but it is sustainable because the carbon footprint coming from Australia. Can I flip over to Gary right quick to ask you, what are your thoughts regarding food costs in healthcare and sustainability, and touch on regenerative agriculture if you can?
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to add to the cost conversation Bruno was speaking about. One of the things that we discovered was that the most expensive thing that the hospitals were buying was meat. And so if we move toward more plant-based diets, it creates more space in the menu. So for example, we found that at the time, it must still be true, that the more sustainably produced meat was 20% more than conventionally produced meat. And we said, fine, reduce the amount of meat on your diet, your purchasing, by 20%. So that created the space for them to then buy more sustainably produced goods. So that's just one strategy called the balanced menus approach. But on the other side, there's sort of 3 incumbent companies, as you know, Carrie, that also control about 35% or more of the food purchasing of healthcare. So there's Aramark and Sodexo's and Morrison's. Their models are more national distribution models. And so as hospitals start to say, we would like more to support more sustainable and local growers, it's disruptive of those models. There's movement in that direction, but some of it has to do with creating enough demand across multiple hospitals or multiple sectors as the standard we're developing. So as Bruno says, there's enough demand to have the price be lowered, so that you're being competitive with the other national distributors in terms of their costs. The other thing is deciding that supporting the local economy, supporting more racially diverse growers, supporting more climate resilient health food systems in your region is actually a goal. So it's not just about, am I serving individual patients, but am I serving the community? Am I building assets? It's kind of what Bruno says, like moving from seeing food as a liability to seeing as an asset, not only for the hospital, but for the communities that it serves. So it's integrating a much broader healing mission into the work of healthcare.
Oh, thank you very much. And I think, Kate, I'd like to pitch that over to you because you have a kind of a closed loop. You're doing a tremendous amount of purchasing. You have a lot of different areas in which your programs are distributing to. And you also have a proliferation of local farms in the New York State area. Would you like to comment at all? You have any comments at all regarding food purchasing?
I do. Thank you so much, Carrie. And it's so inspirational, Gary, everyone, Bruno. You know, the other thing we have a lot of, Carrie, are procurement rules, dealing with city, different sources of federal funding. We're struggling and really pushing against the state's laws around that typically governed by low cost bids. And so we heard everyone mention, right? You want the lowest, the cheapest product, but sometimes the cheapest product, particularly when it comes to food, has all different kinds of hidden or not so hidden detriments, right? And so you can think about how that food is grown. We've been able to make a good case when it comes to ensuring that nutrition is valued. We're able to prioritize a product that comes from New York State. We have the legal capabilities to do that, but we can't really go farther than that. And that's where we're aiming to push. But also, unlike I'm envious of to a degree of the private system, when we have for instance, our city schools are averaging about $3.50, right, for a meal. Every entity, every agency has a very, very, very thin margin and reimbursable rate for those meals. So we're trying the strategy that we have, and not unlike all of my colleagues here, but being the city of New York, we're trying to really leverage the buying power to create actually products when they don't exist. And so we aspire to cook from scratch wherever possible, but in antiquated city buildings with infrastructure, we're actually trying to reformulate some of the products to make them less processed, certainly less processed, but also to meet those food standards that I described. So, if the product just doesn't exist, we do have the buying power to be able to say, well, could you make it for us? And so making sure that, again, the easiest thing here is to from making sure that what's in your food, and traceability is to cook with very raw ingredients and fresh ingredients. And absent from that, being able to make sure we have this clean label and just knowing where our food is coming from. And so that's what my office is really, really at its core about, is transparency to the public, to agencies, to parents, to whomever it might be. This is the type of product that we're buying, and this is whom we purchased it from, and it came from this farm, and so on and so forth. The whole supply chain traceability is what we are aiming for. And again, Mayor Adams, as I mentioned, signed an executive order that now will require our vendors to be able to share that information without making judgment about where it's coming from necessarily. But the first step is building a better understanding about all of the different moments of our food supply in the food system.
Thank you. Thank you. There has been a couple of questions regarding genetically modified foods. And so I'm assuming that you have some pretty strict standards from your vendors as well that may accomplish that or address that.
We have a very robust standards that acknowledge different degrees. I think, I can't remember which of my colleagues, I think it was Bruno, that spoke about chicken. I would say that, New York City schools were actually really leading in antibiotic-free chicken. That's not we're not talking about GMOs, but the antibiotic-free chicken dating back to, you know, the beginnings of the 2000s, and that work continues. So I think, again, this is, you know, even talking with our colleagues in Washington at the Department of Agriculture about trying to get it, again, trying to just get it out of the system to start. We don't need to be using those types of products that usually really using the precautionary principle, right? Of like, if something could possibly be dangerous, why take the risk? And let's just make it as clean as possible.
I agree. Thank you so much. I have a question for you, Chef Warner. Tell me a little bit about your vegetarian culinary program or plant-based dieting program. The breadth of the program, the number of participants, and the surges of that inside the hospitality and healthcare industries.
So we don't specifically have a plant-based program, so to speak. We incorporate culinary medicine into our curriculum as much as we can and make students aware of plant-based foods and how to prepare plant-based meals. We have a restaurant, which is the Heritage Restaurant, where during evening times, we have a chef who focuses on predominantly plant-based cuisine. And we because it's West Michigan and people like the meat and potatoes, right? We still have to cater to that market a little bit as well. But we also incorporate quite a few plant-based dishes in that restaurant. And so it's one of the capstone courses where students really get a feel of how to prepare plant-based meals, make them really sexy, attractive, and also good tasting to customers. And customers really like the plant-based meals the chef prepares with the students. The other thing is, of course, we incorporate, as I've spoken about, the NASA program and how we mentor students, high school students, when they come to us. Really, we try to mentor students to think differently about food and what it means to prepare food. So through the NASA program, we focus predominantly on plant-based foods, and we educate students of, so how do you make plant-based foods taste great with the additional limitations of them being served in space, which your taste buds don't function right and things like that. So I think when you think of all of that, creating an environment where you allow students to think differently about food preparation, I think you create an environment where students then take that and it gets their own legs, so to speak. And I'll give you a few examples, or I want to briefly talk about, Kate mentioned that there's a focus on food entrepreneurs really in New York and how to involve food entrepreneurs. So many of our students are really coming to us because they want to be food entrepreneurs more than they really want to be chefs in fine dining restaurants, which perhaps spells a little bit of doom for the hospitality industry, but that's the trend we are seeing. And that's, I think, goes hand in hand with what we learned about trends in food. And so I think when we educate students about, yes, you can actually be a food entrepreneur, connect with agencies, and make pretty good money doing so, that's a win-win situation. And hospital food is going to be one of those, right? Hospital food, like hospitals offer, for most parts, a pretty flexible schedule, and according to Chef Bruno, also very competitive compensation. So I think it's a win-win situation for us to educate students about, hey, focus on plant-based, and there's a future for you to focus on that.
Thank you. And my question was a little bit loaded. I knew what your curriculum was, but I wanted you to explain really about that, how to inspire and how to think differently. and focusing on the fundamentals. And I'm going to pitch it back to both you, Chef Thiessen, and Gary, on just the focus on fresh seasonal ingredients and how that can not only be profitable, but it also encourages more plant-based items on the menu. Where the question to you, Chef Thiessen, is that do you now have less? Are you able to serve less animal protein by focusing more on fresh seasonal vegetables as you can? And then follow up with you, Gary, is that do you see that across the sectors and through other hospitals? Chef Thiessen?
Yes, well, one thing that we have done, we have implemented a meatless day. Every hospital on Monday have a meatless day for the employees as well as for the patients. Of course, we always have options, for those who want their piece of meat or fish or chicken. Another thing that we have done that we notice is really helping us to cut cost, but also to manage our menu and guide our patients towards plant-based item is we have reduced our menus. I mean, I believe that the shorter the menu is, the better it is, because we can focus on quality. Today, if you go to a restaurant, you'll see the best restaurant in New York City have 5 appetizers, 5 main course, 4 or 5 desserts. And this is where I want to get with with our menu in healthcare. And we're moving towards that very progressively. We can't do it brutally overnight, but because we have to get our patients used to it. But in the past, hospital menus were 3-page long, because they didn't have to cook the food; they bought everything frozen. So that is another area where we not only reduce cost, but at the same time that we reduce the amount of item on our menu, we have increased number of plant-based item. So that's how we manage it.
Great.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll have 2 meatless days a week. That is something that we are watching very carefully, and we hear some very, very good feedback. It's a process, it's about, again, re-educating people, we see that all the time. We have people who come for a treatment and, either they're overweight or whatever. And, we try to give them a 4-ounce piece of steamed fish with a piece of steamed broccoli. And what we've noticed is that they don't eat it. They'll stay in the hospital for 2 or 3 days and they won't eat anything because it's not what they are accustomed to eat. So another thing that we are working on, for the future is we're working on what we call the culinary for the Center for Learning and Innovation, where we are going to teach our patients how to nourish themselves once they leave the hospital, because we notice that it's not while they're staying with us for 1, 2, or 3 days. The average patient stay there 1 or 2 nights, that you can re-educate them with their eating habits. And it's something that you need to do after, and you need to basically teach them, Yeah. And again, there is that perception that healthy food means organic and it's very expensive. And so this is where we have to interfere and educate people.
I'm glad you hit on the point of educating. There's a question just came in regarding making sure that there is a complete protein. And you spoke earlier about the collaboration between culinary and the dietitians. I think that there's a misnomer regarding plant-based dieting, thinking of a complete vegetarian meal and lacking of protein. But can you explain your interpretation of it, such as mine is really focusing on fruits and vegetables, having that make the lead and then complementing it with a protein? What is your philosophy, and how do you define plant-based and ensuring that patients get a complete protein on your patient menus?
Well, plant-based for me, I am anti-GMO product, anti-genetically modified ingredients or engineered product. For me, if you want to eat plant-based, it has to be natural vegetable. I do have vendors today that are sending me some fake shrimp or whatever. I am not interested in serving that. That's the first thing. The second thing is I think we rely a lot on our dietitians as far as balancing the menu of our patients. And I, again, myself, we have tried to bring the healthiest beef possible into our healthcare system. And so I think if you control the portion size, between 4 and 4.5 ounces of all protein with a good plant-based diet, I think that's the right balance. And also, you can also find some in some plant-based item.
I just want to add the other driver around moving toward plant-based diets is the climate. And so the Department of Health and Human Services has launched a climate pledge in the healthcare sector. There's about 700 hospitals that have signed on to this pledge, along with another 200 of Veterans Administration and military hospitals. See, there's almost 1,000 hospitals in the country now that are trying to reduce their carbon footprint 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2050 in alignment with the federal government. So as a climate intervention to address their climate footprint, healthcare is going to be moving beyond looking at their energy and their buildings and their transportation to looking at their food, where they buy their food, how do they move away from more climate intensive kinds of foods, and meat production is one of the most intensive climate stressors. So Gary, that's another trend that's happening. I know Kate wanted to add.
I just wanted to get in on that because actually earlier this morning, we hosted at City Hall for all city agencies that are both programmatic and their communications leads a training on how to address and talk about food and climate, and bringing that very much into just the last 5 minutes. It's really important. And again, like we were one of the first cities years ago to talk about, like, we instituted meatless Mondays on, 1 day a week. But it's interesting on how they really, what plant-based is, it's not vegan, it's not vegetarian. It's not like, I don't subscribe to, I'm not a vegan, I'm not a vegetarian, right? Plant-based as a nomenclature and as an entity is really all in and all inclusive. So it's interesting to think about it from that perspective. And I think you're absolutely right on the notion of connecting to climate. But I also wanted to say, I really appreciate this conversation as it relates to the provision of meat, especially in hospitals. And, we've been introducing slowly, we hear about this, whether it's in the grocery store and what's at eye level, but how do we make the default choice the easier choice? And something that we're doing in our hospitals now, of course, not necessarily for heavily therapeutic diets, but is making the plant-based option the default option. And that's going to be rolled out imminently for all of our meals.
It's so important. And it's actually not only common sense, but it's basic nutrition. And it goes around every ethnic group. I mean, Chef Danielle spoke about soups and the comforting of soups. 90% of soups are plant-based. And it is also being conscious about it. If you're going to make a vegetarian soup, yes, chicken stock is very rich, but it should be a vegetable stock for a vegetarian can eat it. But the other is that I want to get to is the basic peasant meal, if you will, in every culture is beans and rice, complete protein. And is probably the least expensive item that you can have. And so by romancing that and making that the default and having it not only stand out, but look and taste very attractive, we can change their perception and helping educate, not just I'm changing my diet, I'm now plant-based, I'm eating real food. I think both were well said. Gary, I spoke with you earlier, and I have a personal question regarding regenerative agriculture and its opportunity in climate change. Do you have any information, and is this something that healthcare without harm is helping farmers secure?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of that larger vision of healing. In order for us to survive on the planet, we need to move away from industrial agriculture as the core agriculture, for a lot of reasons. Certainly, its climate impact, but also much of it is exploitative. And so, how do we leverage healthcare and other institutions to support more reclaiming of a more sustainable agriculture in regions, in bioregions? Some hospitals are saying, look, we want to buy some percentage of our food as much as we can from within 200 miles of our hospital. Some of them are saying within within hyperlocal, within in the communities that we serve. So it's actually supporting the reclamation of land and local economies and helping to be a driver for that. That's kind of what we mean about being an anchor institution, is leveraging those assets. So, for example, an amazing example is in Alameda County in California, where the sheriff's department has bought 80 acres of land to grow more sustainable food and working with formerly incarcerated people to grow that food. And then the hospitals and Google and others can be the ones that are buying that food. So it's got this beautiful kind of sense of righteous, integrative solutions that are healing people, healing communities, healing the land.
I love that. I love that. I love also of formerly incarcerated individuals giving a fresh start, but a very important start. There's a number of questions regarding the political pushback on basically clean ingredients, low and no sugar added items, made without gluten. Within healthcare without harm, Gary, you have a number of tenets in order to ensure that your menus prescribe to that in order to participate in the program. Can you speak about the politicizing of, food standards, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, there's been, the industry that is benefiting from a lot of sodium, but a lot of sugar, a lot of processed food. They're not exactly rolling over and saying, yeah, go ahead, transform the food system. That is not happening. And so there's enormous pushback, which is why I think getting institutions, schools, universities, hospitals, to be validating this change. The power of the healthcare sector is so huge because it's not just its purchasing power, but its mission, its healing mission. And so when you ask the public, who do you trust around issues around health, or on issues around environment and climate? Health professionals, doctors, nurses, clinicians are the most respected members. So having those people not only change the diets, as Bruno is doing, and working with the food service and the dietitians, but having them be spokespeople in the public sphere for this transformation. It's a matter of who do you trust, and that's one strategy to kind of push back against the PR and the misinformation that's coming from incumbent industries. Yeah,
I think that's spot on. Healthcare should be the wellness hub within the community. And it's a tremendous challenge, and you're coming at it in a different direction, really in a global direction of healthcare without harm. Michelle Thiessen, you're on the ground and really trying to create a model that can be demonstrated in other ways. You talked about how to manage your food costs. You talked about how to improve the quality and the taste of food and the reputation. But the other large challenge is labor and staffing. but you've also spoke briefly about how you're investing in culinary training. One, the fundamental training of a classic French training of how to make a soup, how to make a stock ripe preparation, but also an investment in their culinary education. Can you speak a little bit further on the staffing challenges? How are you addressing the staffing challenges, and how do you see a gateway out of that in the direction that you're doing? I think you're on mute, Chef.
Thank
There
you.
we go. There you go.
Yes, well, it's kind of historical, but in healthcare, we have had difficulties to recruit good chefs because we did not serve great food. And then, in the past 2 years, we had the pandemic. So that has made things a little bit more complicated and challenging, but since I started at Northwell, like I said, we partner with the CIA. I used to go to 2 or 3 career fairs a year. Our HR department was very involved in assisting us and developing that $10,000 tuition program to attract young students to the healthcare system. I am myself a member of the oldest chefs organization in the United States called the Société Culinaire Philanthropique, and I have been able to recruit half of my executive chef through them. And then we are putting the word out. I think people are starting to realize now that Northwell, on the culinary side, or food and nutrition side, if you prefer, is becoming a great place to work. And for chefs, they are starting to realize that they can continue their career and still have a lot of fun. We buy fresh fish, fresh meat, fresh vegetable, fresh bread. We have some incredible food program, and they also have the responsibility of teaching and doing a couple of cooking demo for our patients or our staff. So I think that's how we respond to staffing the best we can, but we have some great initiatives out there. It is still a challenge. I truly have to say that it has been difficult. It has been challenging in the past 2 or 3 years, and COVID is part of it. But I am pretty positive for the future. I think there will be more and more people realizing that they can have a great chef's career in healthcare.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that COVID also it's an awakening of how the hospitality and the food service industry responded, and the massive layoffs and the insecurity that they received. And not only that, there's a great opportunity in healthcare, especially with culinary medicine training, of that being an added benefit in their culinary training, but the security behind it, and most importantly, how they can be better prepared for their families. One of the questions I always ask is do you or any of your family suffer from diabetes, high blood pressure, or and things like that? Just 4 key questions, and there's always someone, right? And so within that, with this culinary background, you can have an opportunity to not only do great things for the general public, but personally for your family as well. And that can, I think, encourage greater retention. Again, Chef, thank you very much for leading the way. You're a true change agent within the industry. Continue to make demonstrate that the fortitude of what change can be done, and how to make great food in hospitals, which is most important. I have exhausted all of the questions I have received. Dr. Harlan, would you like to jump in?
Chef, can I respond to the labor shortage?
Absolutely, please.
So obviously we are in culinary education, and we need culinary students to do our mission, complete our mission, to educate future chefs for the hospitality industry, right? I think what many people forget is the hesitancy of students to take on student loans. We see that quite dramatically playing out in community colleges, especially my program. Many of our students we approach who are in high school programs don't want to come to higher education because of student loans. So we need to solve that problem. And there's many different ways we are working on solving those problems. But I think another interesting way to solve the labor shortage in the hospitality industry is, and I don't know if there's similar programs in the state of New York, but in Michigan, we have a program that is geared towards community college education, and any program, not just the hospitality or culinary programs, which is called Reconnect. So it's a Reconnect program where people who are 26 years or older, who never completed who have a high school diploma but never completed formal higher education, a certificate, a associate's degree, or a bachelor's degree, to come back to college to earn a certificate or an associate's degree completely free of charge. The state pays tuition for that. And what I have been seeing with this program is a tremendous opportunity for hospitality operations. And when I talk hospitality operations, really anything that has to do with food service, to bring potential career changers into that realm. Because what I see is students coming in their early 30s, mid 30s, early 40s, who already have established careers, but say, I no longer want to do what I'm doing. I am thinking of becoming a chef or becoming a baker or owning a food service, food business of some sort. So I think there's tremendous opportunities for that to really bring additional talent with quite a bit of life experience and educate people for the hospitality industry.
I could not agree more. I think you spot on talked about what the need of the apprenticeship program and the collaboration of formal education and hands-on training, and really the online culinary training, what's happening with food as medicine. There's a tremendous opportunity. But I want to thank everyone on the panel today and all of the participants who joined us. Hats off to Chef Daniel Boulud, Kate McKenzie, Marie Mold, you, Chef Dr. Warner, Gary Cohen, and you as well, Chef Bruno. Thanks again for a wonderful presentation today.